Hi and welcome to this lesson on Marxist views of the family. So this lesson we're going to hopefully be able to explain what the Marxist theory is about the family and hopefully be able to use some of the key concepts. So capitalism, bourgeoisie, proletariat and Zaretsky. So as a starter, do you know who the person is in the picture? I say person, he's a puppet, but do you know who he is or do you know anything about him? Pause. So here we go then. What is capitalism? So this is a concept that we're going to keep coming back to, so we need to understand what capitalism is. So give you some pictures. How would you define what capitalism is? So looking at the pictures, what do you think capitalism is? So easiest way to describe what capitalism is, it's all about profit. So it's the pursuit of profit. So this is where private owners invest their money in businesses to make more profit. It's all about selling things. It's about trying to increase your profit. So for example, got these two guys here. These are Richard and Maurice McDonald, and they were the founders and private owners of the, obviously, McDonald's. And they are now billionaire. Well, not now, I think Dad. Maybe. So, what we're going to have a look at is what Karl Marx, who was the person on the first slide, talked about as being the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. So, the way I would do this is I would split my page into the two sections. So, you've got ruling class on one side, proletariat on the other. So, I'm going to give you a bit of an overview for each first before we do the tasks. So, ruling class, what we call the bourgeoisie. Quite a big word, but yeah. So these are the people that would own the businesses. They employ people to work for them. They might give them a smaller wage. So think about what they want. So they want to make more profit. So they want to pay their workers the smallest amount possible. And they obviously make the profit from the goods that the proletariat make and from the labour. So these are some examples of people. And then our proletariat. So this is a bigger, much bigger group. And these work for big businesses. They earn a small wage. They don't generally change their position and are often exploited because, again, they want more wages, but the bourgeoisie do not want to pay them those more wages. So I'm going to give you a number of statements. All you've got to do is, going back to that grid, which category would you put them in? So, first one. Those are your two categories. So we've got upper or middle classes, so which side would you put those in? Non-owners of production, so this means they don't own factories and things like that. Owners of wealth, so who has a lot of the wealth? And then we've got working or lower classes, where would you put those? And minimum wage, which group would that be? Exploited. Owners of production, so this would be things like factories, businesses, land. Make massive profits, exploit the proletariat, own nothing and therefore forced to work. So which sides would you put each of those? And that should give you a good overview of each of the key concepts. So just to check, so your ruling class, these own the means of production, they own the businesses, the factories, they own the wealth. They are the upper or middle classes, they make massive profits, and they exploit the proletariat for that to continue. Then your proletariat doesn't own any of these means of production, they don't own the land, they don't own businesses or factories. They have to then work for the bourgeoisie. They're generally working or lower classes, earning minimum wage, exploited by the bourgeoisie. Now, if you access this through the student area, you'll be able to find this video. This video talks about some of the origins of Marxism. So when we talk about Marxism today, a lot of what we talk about is not necessarily Karl Marx saying it, but it comes from the roots of what Karl Marx talked about. So this idea that we have two social groups of people, they are in conflict with each other because one wants better working conditions and one wants to make more money. So it's that kind of difference between the two social groups, and it's based around the idea of capitalism. So the video is a good one to watch and it does give you a nice overview of that. So how does this apply? Oh, I'm going to skip the video. and we'll come back to that later. So how does this apply to the family then? So Marxist views of the family. So most Marxist sociologists see the family as something that supports capitalism. It's there to kind of help. And a lot of the things that happen within the family make sure that capitalism keeps going. So if you can see in the picture here, like the men are coming out from work, they're being soothed, calmed by their family, prepared, getting all their stuff ready, and then sending them off for another day of work. So kind of like when we talked about the warm bath theory, this idea that the family are there to get you ready for the next day of work. So it's kind of supporting capitalism in that way. Another way that the families support capitalism is that we're seen as consumer units. So as soon as you start having a family, you need to buy more products to support that family. So for instance, bigger packs of yogurt is the picture that I've used there, but family packs of stuff. It does mean that you have to buy maybe a bigger car, a bigger house. All these things make us consumer units, which obviously helps with capitalism. Also, obviously, capitalism is quite an unfair system. What most Marxists believe that would eventually happen is that the proletariat would realise that, hang on a minute, we're being massively exploited here, and would eventually rebel and overthrow the kind of bourgeoisie, and there would be like a socialist society where we shared everything equally. Obviously, that has not happened, and Eli Zaretsky, who is a Marxist sociologist that you do need to know about, says that the reason this hasn't happened is because of the cult of private life. Again, complicated word, it just means that because people are so focused on their family life and what's going on in their homes, they're not really focusing on the injustices of capitalism and things like this. So, for instance, a lot of people haven't maybe been aware of some of the issues with things like students getting free school meals and how little that they've been getting during lockdown, because they're focusing on what's going on at home with their family, which means they're not rebelling against capitalism and the system. A final thing that Marxists talk about is the idea that family supports capitalism by teaching children to obey instructions and follow instructions. So this then helps them when they're in the workplace, because if you are taught from a very young age to follow instructions, it means you're going to be able to follow your boss and be successful in that situation. And the family also provides emotional support for workers, and it stops them rebelling then because they fear of losing their job. So if you think about it, if you've got a really bad job and you hate your boss, you're more likely to come home and moan at your family, take your frustrations out there, than do it to your boss, because then you're less likely to lose your job. So the family supports workers in that way as well. And it also keeps people working, because it's the idea that, well, I must keep working because if I lose my job, then what about my family? So families keep workers in their jobs as well. Now, a bit of an evaluation point, which we're going to look at some more on the next slide, is one of the arguments here is, while Marxists say that, families are teaching children to obey and follow instructions, but yet, how could we teach children and bring them up without teaching them to follow instructions? Yes, it might help them in the future, but you generally would need that skill for every stage of your life. So this is where you've got to kind of think, how relevant is this? So you kind of evaluate the points that you're making. So some evaluation points. So firstly, we've got one from feminists. So they argue that the Marxists are pretty much just looking at social class. They're really ignoring the power that men hold over women. So it doesn't matter what social class, feminists would argue that men still hold power over women. Functionalists, they would believe that actually Marxists are only really seeing the negative sides of families, and actually there's a lot of big benefits of families and how they help society. And finally, postmodernists say that having lots of stuff that we can pick and choose from, that we can consume and buy, is good, and people like having a lot of choice, and it's a good part of society. So obviously Marxists have kind of talked about the negative aspects in terms of society and how the family is preparing people for capitalism and their social class position, but there are other sides to this argument. So to finish off, I've done some practice questions. These are not all exam-based questions, so they're just testimology ones. So first one is a 1-mark one about which term is used to describe a family with parents and their children. Then you've got, in a traditional nuclear family, what roles are played by men and women. What term can be used to explain a lone parent family headed by a woman? Which sociologists use the term warm bath theory? And which theory believes women are exploited within the family? So the 6 little questions for you to, or 6 marks available for you to have a go at. Please let me know if you've got any questions or you get stuck with anything, and I hope you're all well. Bye!